what is this plant, this thing called tea? I'm sitting in my tea shop right now and surrounded by 140 different types of tea. There are many, many more varieties than what I have to offer. But tea is one plant. It's Camellia sinensis. It's a beautiful camellia type evergreen plant. We're going to talk about that. And then I'm going to show you the 6 different types of tea that we usually see in the tea world. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how tea is made. It's a complicated process and varies from country to country. I'm going to give you a little bit of the history of tea because it's really important, the countries that it comes from and the variations that happen with tea depending on the country that you're in. And then a real interesting topic to many are the health benefits of tea. Why are we drinking this and how did they discover those benefits? And then how you taste tea, how you describe it, what it looks like, what you're looking for in the taste. And then how you go about brewing a cup of tea. So at home you can start your own rituals of enjoying the perfect cup of tea. So let's dive in. What is tea? Tea is the second most consumed drink in the world after water. I would have thought it would be coffee, but tea around the world is huge. And it's anything that comes from this Camellia sinensis plant. As you can see by the picture, there are camellia flowers, little buds that bloom, but mostly tea leaves are being picked. The bud before it opens and the 2 leaves on the top are what tea pickers are going for. It's a sturdy subtropical evergreen plant, dark green glossy serrated leaves, almost looks like a holly. And it's a plant that's native to Asia and grown in upwards of 45 countries around the world, including China, Japan, Sri Lanka, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, South Africa, Kenya. Wish it was grown in the United States. It seems like we have every kind of growing climate, but other than I think one place in the South, there is not any tea being grown, or maybe some in Washington State as well, but that's it. Every variety of tea comes from this Camellia sinensis plant. There's a picture of the plant, kind of what it would look like. There's 3 varietals that are the most popular, the most well-known in the Camellia sinensis world. One comes from China. One later on was a wild derivative of it and is called the Assamica plant. And that's what's grown in India. And then the Indonesian variety kind of holds its own from the Cambodia area. There's thousands of sub-varieties based on these plants. And a variety is dependent on changes in where you are and what the climate is doing. But they're all still based on the same plant. Cultivars is a word that you'll hear a lot, and that's a cultivar of a tea plant is what the human does to it, changes it to make it into smooth or a different type of plant, and they name those cultivars based on the where they're being made. So anything without Camellia sinensis in it is called a tisane or an herbal tea. And that includes things like rooibos, which you might have had some experience with, all the herbals like chamomile and the fruit and herb blends. Right now I'm drinking a little chrysanthemum tea. You might be able to see this in my pot, which is just basic chrysanthemum flowers. So this is a tisane, this is not a tea, but there's many benefits to drinking things related to tea, but not teas themselves. So I like this graph just to kind of give you a sense of what the tea production around the world is like. As you can see in our continent, there's no production. But if you look over to your right, you can see that China, which has 38% of the world's production, is the biggest tea grower, quickly followed by India, which later on in the 17th century discovered tea and has, you know, some of the most amazing teas in the world. China's production, it's interesting to note, stays in China, that more than half of it that's grown there stays there, where more than half of India, well, yeah, more than half of India's production gets exported. So it's a huge export market for mostly black tea. Okay, so let's go back to what this plant, this exceptional plant, is all about. So there's a word that's used in wine and cheese and coffee that's terroir, and that works with tea as well. And that's the things that will affect the tea and how it comes out. And of course, those factors can be things like the soil that it's grown in, the climate, the plant material itself, those three varietals that I was showing you, the characteristics of where it's grown, the water, the, you know, global warming certainly is a big part of how things are changing. So one year you might have a fantastic climate for growing a great Darjeeling, and then another year not so much. So all of these things are really sensitive, tea is really sensitive to. And so you can imagine, just like wine, where if you get a 2018 tea that you found was absolutely fantastic, and then the next year you get the next production of it and it's not so good, there's a lot of different things that are contributing to that. But it all comes from that same plant. It's what, you know, the world does with it and what we as humans do with it that will make it a different flavor, a different sort of taste each time. Okay, so as I said, there's you can see in the picture to the right that the tea is grown on a lot of times very steep rocky hills, and that the climate for some of these high mountain grown teas is great. There's fog, there's rain, there's a lot of intense light, and all of those are contributing to that terroir that we just talked about. But too much rain, not enough rain, just the right amount of rain. Too much sun burns the leaves. Early morning fog might not let the sunlight in. Did it get too cold? Is it too hot? All of those things, including, you know, what's in the outlying regions of these tea gardens, can make a difference. There's not a lot of things that affect the tea plant. So, you know, they don't do much spraying for teas, on tea leaves. So the organic idea is pretty easy to, even though it's hard to get that assignation that it's an organic plant, but there's not a lot that they're trying to protect the tea leaf from other than a few bugs. So it can be grown in these loose, deep soil at high altitudes. The picture you're looking at in the background has certainly gives you an idea of how hard it might be to grow tea. It grows wild throughout much of Asia, but you can, I've been told by people that have traveled in these areas that you can see a tea bush practically in everybody's front yard, where you'll just go out and pick the leaves and put them in your pot and have a cup of tea. But for the most part, now we're talking gigantic estates that are trying to produce these massive amounts of tea. A lot of the premium teas are usually the higher elevation teas, and they're on steep slopes, which require them to pick by hand. And you can imagine it's not a job that, that many people want to do. It's hard work, it's lonely, it's very seasonal. And as it notes here, it takes about 2,000 leaves or more, in the case, depending on the tea, to make a pound of finished tea. There's a lot of problems going on in India and in Asia with, you know, finding enough people to pick teas. It's not a unloved job, and it does take a lot of finesse to pick the right part of the tea leaf, and it takes a lot of small hands. So many of these pickers are women, and the men are the processors. A lot of this is going to, to a mass-produced state.